Let's go to our first class. So here we can say this is H.S.B for CSEC. Now this is the first section in the syllabus, guys. Section A, which is called the living organisms and the environment. What we are going to see today is number one on the syllabus is characteristics of living organisms or living things. Right, so characteristics of living organisms. When we say living organisms, guys, we mean things that have life, right? So let's say if in biology we talk about the life kingdoms, right? All living things on Earth belong to one of these kingdoms, right? They are either bacteria, right, or protozoa, protists, right? We say protists, or fungi. Some people say fungi, or plants, or animals. That is what we call the five kingdoms of life. Right? All living things on Earth belong to one of these kingdoms. Right? When we say bacteria, remember these are unicellular, right? Unicellular organisms, like one bacterium is just one single cell, right? One single cell. We say that is one bacterium. Protists are also, most of them are unicellular organisms, very tiny, right? Like one that is called the amoeba, like this one. Fungi or fungi, some of them can be microscopic, right? Others can be big, like mushroom, for example, right? Plants, well, some of them have flowers. We call them flowering plants. Others don't have flowers. And then animals, well, these are divided into two major groups. Some of them are invertebrates, right? And others are vertebrates. So when we say invertebrates, there is where we have those that don't have bones, right? Let we say a worm, right? Insects, right? They don't have bones. They don't have a backbone, so that's why they are called invertebrates. However, vertebrates, they all have bones. And there is where we have, for example, fish, right? We have amphibia, right? Like frogs, for example. We have reptiles, like snakes. We have birds and mammals. So where are we within this classification of living things? Which kingdom do we belong to? Are we animals? Well, let me tell you guys, if someone calls you an animal, don't be too offended because we are animals, right? Yes, we are animals. Within animals, we are vertebrates, and within the vertebrates, we are mammals. See? So there is where we are, within this group. Now, what do all these living things have in common? That's what we need to talk about, right? Characteristics of living things. What do they all have in common? Maybe if you look at a fungus like mushroom, someone asks you, "Do you have anything in common with a mushroom?" You say, "Well, no, nothing at all." How can you say that? Or with a bacterium? But yes, we do share some characteristics, and those are the characteristics that we call characteristics of living organisms, right? Guys, are we following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good. Well, I hope you understand my pronunciation. I'm not a native English speaker, as you may have noticed, right? Understand everything that I say?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good, great. So, so let me talk about the what we all have in common. Doesn't matter if we talk about a bacterium or a protist or a fungus or a plant, right? So if you look at, let me say, a plant, a tree in your yard, you say, do we have anything in common? Well, yes. All living things have 7 characteristics in common. So what are the characteristics of living things we are talking about? Characteristics of living organisms. Okay, good. Well, let me show you a way of remembering this easily. We are going to use these mnemonics, right? Grimna. If you want, you can add a C at the end. Grimna C. Right? Grimna. Grimna. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we are adding this C at the end. That makes 8. 8 characteristics. The G stands for growth. Right? Say that's the first one. All living things, guys, grow. You see, a fish, a tiny fish, will grow into a little bit bigger. A frog, a snake, right? A bird, a lion, a human. Plants, they are tiny at the beginning and then they grow, right? All living things grow. A fungus, even these guys here, which are unicellular, the cell becomes more complex with time. And we can say that it grows, right? So growth means the increase in size and complexity of an organism, right? Increase in size and complexity. So with time, we grow bigger and more complex, right? Organisms normally grow bigger and more complex. So we all share this. We all share that characteristic. The second characteristic, this one means respiration. What is respiration? This is a process whereby energy is obtained from nutrients, right? Especially glucose. Let me tell you the process of respiration. We are going to study this later on, right? But respiration is the process, let's say in humans, is the process whereby we put oxygen, right? Oxygen that we breathe in, we take it from the lungs, that oxygen will go to all parts of your body, right? Will come out of blood and will go into your cells. And glucose also. Glucose will go from the, let me say, the intestines, right, in the digestive system, right? Glucose will be transported by blood to your cells. And then oxygen and glucose will go into your cells, right? Into the mitochondria. I'm going to talk about this later on, right? And then there, oxygen combines with glucose in the mitochondria and produces energy. Actually, that's the process whereby energy is unlocked from glucose, which is food that we get from carbohydrates, right? So that process whereby we get energy from nutrients like glucose, so here we get energy, that process is called respiration. By the way, here CO2 and water are also produced. Right? So that is what we call respiration, guys. The process whereby living things get energy from nutrients, from food, right? So, process whereby energy is obtained from nutrients. Who does that? All these living things, right? You see, birds get energy from the food they eat, reptiles, frogs, amphibia, fish, right? Worms, insects, butterflies, they also get energy from food. Plants get energy from the food that they produce themselves through the process of photosynthesis. You see, fungi and bacteria, they are decomposers. They get energy from the food that they decompose, right? Notice too, all these living things, they get energy, and that process is called the respiration. Right, guys? Now, this I stands for irritability. Irritability, which is also called sensitivity. This is responding to, you see, this is the ability to detect and respond to stimuli from the environment. Right, guys? The ability to detect and respond to stimuli. Detect and respond to stimuli. What do we mean by this? Well, that means that all these living things somehow have organs or ways to be aware of the environment and respond to stimuli. If there are, let's say, some ants, insects, you see crawling on the ground, and suddenly there is a sunlight starts shining on them too strongly, Well, they will go and hide under this rock here, right? Or maybe we'll come here on the other side to get some shadow. See what I mean? So that is what living things do. They detect and respond to stimuli. When we say stimuli, what we mean? We mean light or heat or sound, right? And organisms which are more complex, like animals and plants, for example, they have organs which are called sensory organs that help them detect and respond to stimuli. Like, for example, we have the nose, the eyes, the ears, the skin, right? The tongue that help us respond to stimuli. A cockroach, for example, an insect will have, let we say, antenna. This antenna, we don't have that, but they do. And that helps them be aware of the environment and detect, right, detect some stimuli. So that is a, yes, that is a one characteristic that all living things have. They all detect and respond to different kinds of stimuli. Like what? Like heat, light, you see temperature changes, if it's cold, too hot. Right? Now this M stands for movement. This one is easy to understand, movement. They all move. All these guys here move. Am I correct? Do plants move? Well, yes. Plants also move. They don't move about, but this is, however, this is called movement means moving uh, part of the body, part of the body, or moving about. We move about, that is called locomotion. Locomotion. That is very important. Huh? You know, guys, plants, they can move actually as they grow. Plants move as they grow, and they grow towards light, right? If we have, let me say, a box, right? You take a box, you make an opening here, you put a plant inside the box. A tiny plant like this one. Let me say in a pot, right? With some water. Just leave it there for a week, right? For a week. After a week, you go and check, you will see the plant has grown like this, and probably is coming out of the small window. You see that? It has grown towards the light. That is what they do. Am I correct? And that is a form of movement, right? That is a form of movement. That movement in plants is called tropism. Tropism. Actually, that is phototropism because photo means light. Right? Phototropism. Plants also grow downwards, right? Their roots grow downwards in search for water. That is also considered as a form of movement in plants, right? And that one is called the geotropism, right? So plants can move by doing phototropism, which is growing towards the light, and they can also do geotropism, which is growing downwards as the roots go for water, right? For underground water. Now the next one, which is this N, stands for nutrition. Well, this is something that all living things need to do in order to do respiration. So these two are linked. Are they not? Because respiration says is the process whereby energy is obtained from nutrients. And for you to get nutrients into your body, you need to do nutrition, right? So nutrition means getting nutrients into the body, right? All right, getting nutrients, right? Maybe we can say that is a feeding, right? Or we say here producing own food. Because plants, for example, they are not consumers. They don't consume food that is available in the surroundings. They, however, produce it themselves through the process of photosynthesis. Guys, so here we mean, when we say producing own food, we mean by photosynthesis. Right, guys? All living things, they get food one way or another. Like this bacterium, for example, it doesn't have a mouth, it does not have a digestive system, of course, it's just one single cell. So how does it feed? Well, it will get food from the surroundings. You know what bacteria do? They say is this bacterium happens to end up on your food that you have left, let's say, outside the fridge overnight, uncovered. Some bacteria, even from the air, will land on the food and will start spoiling it by feeding on that. How do they do that? Well, bacteria are decomposers, and so are fungi. You know, what they do is they release some chemicals from their cells, and those chemicals, which are actually digestive enzymes, will break down the food outside, and then the tiny molecules like glucose, for example, will be absorbed by the cell through the cell membrane. Right? Fungi can also do that, you see? They will release enzymes that will break down the food, let's say from a dead tree or a dead animal, right? Or just a piece of bread that you leave in a corner and it gets some mold, right? Which is a fungus. So that's how they feed, right? They break down the organic matter to get nutrients from it, right? Animals, well, they are more complex. Some of them even have a digestive system, right? Now, plants, they don't get food. They produce it through photosynthesis. But in general, all living things need to get nutrients in order to get energy for growth and development. That's why we need to include this one, which is nutrition. And then, as we get nutrients, we need to get rid of substances that we produce on the way, right? And those substances are called the metabolic wastes, which are substances produced through chemical reactions in the body, right? So excretion is defined as the removal of metabolic, right, wastes from the body. We, for example, have different ways of removing metabolic waste, like when we urinate, right, or sweat, we are getting rid of substances that we produce in the body, waste that we produce in the body. I'm not talking about feces. You see, too, we don't produce it in the body. I mean, those substances are just substances that we ate, that we have eaten, and we didn't break it down, we didn't digest it, and then we need to get rid of that. But those substances were not produced in the body. It's not like the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. That one, yes, that one we produce it in the body. Here it is, look, this one. We produce it in the cells. Right? And then it will come out of the cells into your blood, and the blood will take it to the lungs, and then you breathe it out. So carbon dioxide is a form of excretion in humans, right? All right, and then these are, guys, this R stands for reproduction. All living things reproduce one way or another, right? Like, for example, there are two forms of reproduction. Reproduction can be either sexual or sexual. Right? Sexual reproduction does not require a female and a male sex cell, right, for it to take place. One organism can reproduce on its own without the need of a partner, right, a sex partner. Like, for example, a bacterium will multiply, will divide, will split, actually will split into two baby bacteria, we call them, right? So there is no need of a female and a male bacteria to come together to produce descendants. See what I mean? One bacterium can split into two, and each of these two will later on split into two, right? And that happens actually quite quickly. That's why food may get spoiled overnight, because bacteria take the chance and get energy, but also multiply quickly. That is what we call asexual reproduction. However, sexual reproduction requires a male sex cell like the sperm and a female sex cell like the egg, right? To, you see, for the organisms to multiply, right? So this one is the male, this is the female sex cell, and they will combine together. We call that process fertilization. We're going to study that later on. Right? Now, when we look at this group of organisms, guys, they all multiply one way or another. As I said, bacteria split into two, amoeba split into two, fungi multiply by spores, which are tiny seed-like structures that they release, kind of in the form of a powder, which is blown away by the wind. And wherever that powder lands on the ground, there you will have baby mushrooms growing later on. See what I mean? That's the way they multiply, by spores. Plants can multiply both sexually or asexually, and animals multiply mostly sexually. We call that reproduction, right? So let's say reproduction is producing offspring, right, or descendants. Guys, so don't forget Grimna. Now, what about the C? What does the C stand for? Does anyone know? All living things also share this characteristic, this C. What is it about? Well, what does it stand for? Well, this one stands for cells. Yes, cells. That means that all living things are made up of cells, right? All living things, right, are made up of cells. We are made up of cells. And so are bacteria. Well, bacteria is just unicellular, it's just one single cell. So one organism can be made up of one single cell, like bacteria or protists. Most of them are unicellular, right? Fungi like yeast, for example. Do you know that yeast is a fungus? But that one that we use for baking, right? Uh, it's a unicellular organism, right? Made up of one single cell. However, plants and animals are made up of many cells.